Hi. Hey guys, what's up? My name is Dom. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new to my channel, I typically make bookish content, movie content, and anything else in between because I like to do whatever I want on this channel, and tonight is going to be movie content and TV shows and musicals because for today's video, we are going to go over everything I watched in the month of February. I have a lot to talk about. I have 11 pages worth of notes. A lot of it is Oscar-nominated films. We got one TV show and one musical. Let's jump right into it. So the first movie I watched in the month of February, I actually went to the theater for, and that is Companion. This is about a woman named Iris who goes to the home of a billionaire with her boyfriend, and the billionaire's death sets off a series of unfortunate events, which is the best way to put this without spoiling anything. So I was worried about this going into it. I thought it would be corny and like not good because you know how like horror and thrillers that release in January. This released January 31st, which is why I watched it in February. But you know how those movies tend to just be bad? Well, this was really fun. I had a blast with this. This movie has the perfect balance of not taking itself too seriously, but also knowing when to do so, and it was really campy at times. I knew going into this movie that Sophie Thatcher was going to be great because I saw her in Heretic. I have not seen Yellow Jackets, which I know is what she's known for, but I did really like her in Heretic. That was one of my top like 15 movies of last year. It was an honorable mention, so I knew she was going to be great, but Jack Quaid also surprised me in ways, again, I don't want to spoil the movie, but I was, for reasons, I was very fooled. There's a certain object in this movie that ends up being really important, and I could have never guessed how important it was, but now that I've seen the movie and just can remember past scenes, I thought the foreshadowing was very subtle in a way that was low-key genius, just because I was so shocked. So I really liked that. The beginning of this movie made me think I was going to actually be seeing something else, but I did end up getting something totally different that I enjoyed because this ended up being a commentary on domestic abuse, and I think it handled it very well. This is not a 5 out of 5 star film, as much fun as I had, just because of the runtime. I thought it was just a tad bit longer than it needed to be, but I did give this 4 out of 5 stars. The next movie I watched at home. It's a Best Picture nominee and a Best Picture winner, and that is Anora. This is about a young sex worker named Anora. She goes by Annie. She marries a very rich Russian adult. He's 21 but acts like a young teenager, and she quickly learns that life is not going to turn out like she hoped. I actually avoided this movie for the longest time just because I didn't think it would interest me. It was getting Oscar buzz when it came out last year, but I was like, no, it won't do anything, and yet here it is as the 2025 winner. So the only reason I did watch this is because I do like to try to watch all the nominees. I watched 7 out of 10 this year, but I was impressed. It caught me by surprise. I really do like our main character Annie and her characterization. She could be very crass. She is a sex worker in Brooklyn, so there's going to be a lot of swearing in this. She's going to verbally fight back at the very least. So she could be crass, but at the same time, because of other certain scenes, I thought she could be very endearing. I really enjoyed the second act of this movie, even though there were certain cuts that I think lasted a bit too long. The second act as a whole was super fun. It does not match the tone of the first and third acts. It's like its own thing. But I had a blast with it, especially because I feel like it subverts the stereotype we often see with rich Russians, because I feel like the Russian mafia is a go-to stereotype, and while like you can argue that's what these three represented, at the same time those three characters were just so goofy. I felt like I was watching the Three Stooges just with a Russian accent. Everyone in this movie, even the small side characters, did a great job. Everyone was a great actor in this. First and foremost, Annie, played by Mikey Madison, she literally won Best Actress. I was rooting for Demi Moore, if I'm being honest, but Mikey was my second pick, so if Demi had to lose to anyone, I'm glad it was her. Something about her portrayal just made Annie feel very real, and I enjoyed every scene she was in. I don't think this actress did a bad job in anything. The guy she marries, his name is Vanya. I think his real name's Ivan, but his nickname is Vanya. This actor does a great job playing one of the biggest fucking dweebs you've ever met. He's one of those guys who says something he thinks is funny, so he'll laugh at his own jokes, and then you playfully laugh along just to get him to shut the fuck up. And Mikey Madison, the looks on her face, her facial expressions were perfect. She was doing one of those that I think like every every person can relate to, because I feel like we all know someone like Vanya. I really like the guy who was nominated for Best Supporting Actor in this movie. He's one of the 3 Russian stooges. I forgot what his character's name is, but I know the actor's first name is Yura. His performance was different than the other supporting actors that I've noticed. While they had more like in-your-face styles of acting, his style was very quiet. He plays the character that observes and kind of represents the audience, because everything he felt, I felt. If we were to assume this was a real situation that we find ourselves in, like, I don't want to get involved, but I can't look away. I want to help, but there's no way for me to help, so I kind of just have to helplessly watch this unfold. And like I said, the minor characters also did a great job. Vanya's dad made me laugh. Vanya's mom, minimal screen time, and yet still managed to piss me the fuck off. Whoever that actress is, she captured the worst fucking Karen you've ever met. Rich Karen so well. I was ready to fight that bitch. And I think one of the reasons I was so impressed with this movie was how realistic it is. I feel like if this were any other movie, Annie would have been given her dream life. She would have been given her happy ending. But the way this movie handled it, it felt very real to what would actually happen in a poor person versus rich person situation. Like if you find a poor person and a rich person at odds with one another. To relate to that and Mikey Madison's acting and Annie as a character, like I said, she's crass but also endearing. It's just part of you, not part of you, but I did ask myself as I was watching this, like, you want to ask Annie, like, how did you not see this situation coming? But then at the same time, this character's happiness was just so contagious. I still felt, even though I saw the outcome coming, I still felt so bad for her. I do love how silent the very end of this film is, and then you're kind of just left alone with your thoughts and how real the movie was and how realistically this would play out if it were to happen in real life. So great movie. Really my only critique is that Act 2 is just dragged out a little bit too long, but I ended up giving this 4 out of 5 stars. The next movie I watched was another Best Picture nominee, and this was actually my choice. This was the movie I wanted to win, and that is Conclave. So in this movie, Cardinal Lawrence is leading the election of a new pope, and he finds himself in the midst of a bunch of controversies that could tear the process apart. I was excited to watch this, and it did not disappoint. As someone who grew up in the church, I love a good Catholic church scandal along the lines of this. I will say the drama involved in this movie, it wasn't as intense as I was expecting given the synopsis. Like I was expecting like world breaking news, but that's not really what happens. But still, because of the acting and the editing and the music, I still felt very tense. Like I was literally at the edge of my seat. I was sitting at the edge of my couch when watching this. I love the different kinds of cardinals involved and like their views and the things they had done in their past that could affect how they elect the new pope or just their own election. And it just goes to show how hard it is to find someone who's holy enough for this spot, because you're gonna hope this person isn't marred by anything, but we're all human. We all have flaws. We've all sinned. It's just how great is the sin? How bad is it? And can we forgive that sin versus other sins? Isabella Rossellini is in this, and she was nominated for Best Supporting Actress. And then I know her just because in college I took an Italian film class, so I had to watch her dad's movies, Roberto Rossellini, and I've seen a bunch of her mom's movies, Ingrid Bergman. And to my knowledge, this is the first time I've seen Isabella in something that wasn't Friends, because I know she featured in an episode of that. So again, didn't know what to expect. But I like the idea of her character. She played a nun who's a silent observer, but has all the gossip. And I really like the cardinal who ended up being picked at the end. I would not have expected him from the beginning of the movie, but in retrospect, it makes a lot of sense. And I really liked the commentary that surrounded what his controversy was. I'm just not going to tell you what that is because that is a big spoiler. So the most obvious takeaway I took from this movie is that it shows the corruption in the Catholic Church and how stressful it is to those within that want to do good. But I also think it could be a commentary on voting systems in general. We see it in all sorts of elections, whether it's a president, governor, mayor, prime minister, what have you. There's a lot of fighting back and forth. There's a lot of fighting over morals. Who's a better person because of what? Who's a worse person because of what? No one is perfectly moral. Some people just did worse shit than others. And we do see that in this movie. Like each person, each like named cardinal that was like running for pope in a sense had their little posse. Some people thought what this cardinal did was fine. Others were like, no, he can't be the Pope. He's going to ruin everything we worked for over the past few years, and vice versa. Like, I know there was one scene where a cardinal was accused of being too conservative, another cardinal was accused of being too liberal. So in general, that commentary, whether it's for the church, president, governor, etc., etc., it just shows that no matter the corruption or the morals, what have you, groups of people are going to vote in their best interest. Now down to the technical value of this movie, are two technical things I want to talk about. One is the editing. I'm actually shocked this didn't win for best editing, just because I love the scene where all the cardinals are arriving, because I love the framing of everything. I just love the little montage it was, and it made me feel like I was watching a documentary. I also loved watching the montages of when the cardinals were voting. And I feel like the sound design in this movie doesn't get talked enough, because this movie sounds like you're in a church. Have y'all, you know when you're in a Catholic cathedral and the acoustics go hard, you could just hear everything? Like, if you're in the front of the church and you turn a page in the Bible, a person all the way in the back is going to hear you do that, just because of how hollow it is. And that's what this movie sounds like. You could hear every single sound, even down to the lead actor, Ralph Fiennes, breathing. So like I said, as much as I liked Anora, this is my Best Picture winner. And it's my favorite movie of the year so far. I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. So then I watched the only nominated live action short I was able to get my hands on, and this actually won the award, and that is I'm Not a Robot. And this is about a woman who doesn't pass the, whatever it's called, the CAPTCHA test. I have to say, it was a wild experience watching this after having just seen Companion, because it's basically the same plot, just totally different messages. But I don't really have a lot to say about this one. Like, at the end, it was just okay for me overall, and it felt like something I've seen before, not just because I had literally just seen Companion, but I just mean in general. There just wasn't enough time to flesh out the characters and the world surrounding it, but I did give this 3.5 out of 5 stars. So next is another Best Picture nominee that is absolutely mind-boggling to me that it was even considered for an award, let alone 13 fucking nominations, and it's the worst movie I watched so far this year, and that is, in fact, Emilia Perez. This is a musical that somehow beat Wicked at the Golden Globes or whatever award show that was, about a cartel leader who comes out as trans to her lawyer, who she kidnapped, and is now beginning the process of her transition, at least in Act 1. And you think the movie's gonna be a commentary about transness, but then it just kind of goes off the rails in a way where it just made the movie hot garbage. I do want to say off the bat, before I get into the nitty-gritty about how I personally felt, I know about the commentary from the Mexican and trans communities surrounding this film. I am not Mexican, I am not trans, so I'm not going to be really commenting on the Mexican culture in the film and on the trans experience itself, just because what could I personally possibly say? I'm going to let those communities speak for themselves. You could find their opinions everywhere online. So what I will talk about when it comes to this movie, I'm a huge musical theater lover, so I will talk about this as a musical. I'm a huge movie fan, so I'm going to talk about this as its own movie. So like the technical stuff and whatnot, I'll talk about this as a story, and I will mention the things that just seemed off to me. First off, this is a musical, again, that beat Wicked at whatever award show that was, that did not have a single good song. Not a single song in this movie, and that includes the one that won Best Song at the Oscars. That acceptance speech was so fucking weird. But anyway, not a single song in this movie was catchy or memorable. All the songs in this movie felt like they were building up to some big climax that ended up never happening. So all the songs felt very incomplete. They had extremely weird lyrics. They felt incredibly on the nose. So many of these songs felt like they were originally conceived as regular dialogue, but then whoever was making the music for this movie, like, remembered at the very last minute they were supposed to be making a musical. So it came off again as on the nose and just very, very weird. And the song I'm thinking of specifically is the Penis to Vagina song. I really want to put a clip of it in this video, but I also don't want to be copyrighted. Because I don't know, but like, if you haven't heard that song, I think it's called La Vaginoplasty, something like that. Like, girl, I thought that song was a fucking meme for the longest time, so my jaw was on the floor when I figured out it was real. And you know what? Before that song, because that's the first time they sing in English in this movie, before that song, when I saw like just the weird lyrics and how everything was worded, I was willing to admit maybe it's a translation issue. And you know how everything can't be translated one-to-one. But then I had the same issue with the English songs. So one of the critiques I've been seeing about this movie from Spanish speakers is that the Spanish in this movie sounds like it was written in French first, then the lyricist went to Google Translate, put in French to English, and then took the English and put it from English to Spanish. And just because of how weird everything is worded, especially in the English-speaking songs, I'm inclined to agree with that theory. And if you speak a language, you should know like Google translates shit sometimes. From an Italian perspective, to give you guys an example of what I mean that Google Translate could be shit sometimes. In Italian, when you want to tell someone your name, like my name is Dom, if you were to put that into Google Translate, it's going to come out as Il mio nome è Dom, which literally translated is yes, my name is Dom. But Italians don't use that to say their name. They would say mi chiamo Dom, which literally translated is I call myself Dom. So that's where discrepancies can happen. And I wonder if that was what was happening with the Spanish in this movie. There's also not one good singer in this movie. And every time I say that, one of my friends always has to bring up, what about Selena Gomez? And I need y'all to be so fucking for real. That woman has never been able to sing. So yes, I am including her in this no one. I didn't like a single person but a very, 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 very minor character who starts singing in like the middle of the film, but she has like 2 minutes of screen time and she's not even like actually a character, she's more like an NPC. So it's like, you found her, but what happened with everyone else? Another thing when it comes to like the singing and the songs itself, something that made these songs sound so weird was that there were multiple times when I thought a character was talking just for me to hear some random vibrato. I would just randomly hear that and be like, oh, they're supposed to be singing. And the character I'm thinking of specifically, a lot of them do this, but the one I'm thinking of specifically, the Israeli doctor was really bad with it. He would talk and then a random word was sung. And like, that doesn't make for good music. And the one thing that really pissed me off with Emilia Perez's actress, I think her name is Carla Sofia Gascon, and then Zoe Saldana, was that her name? they're singing. Both of them would sing, and Carla was really bad. Carla was the worst with this. They would both sing in like these weird, scratchy, hoarse voices, or sometimes this weird like whisper sing that you can argue is character acting. But then I feel like there were just other songs that proved that it wasn't character acting. It just more so felt like an excuse that hide the actor's lack of talent, especially Carla specifically, because there's that scene, the song that won Best Song at the Oscars, where she's trying to belt and she sounds terrible. A musical and you don't have any good singers in this movie. And then honestly, as a story, whether or not this was a musical, I just thought was terrible. I expected it to be an exploration of being trans because that's how it was marketed, but we never get that. Like, once she makes her transition, we really never go back to that conversation. And Emilia, who was a cartel leader and one of the biggest in Mexico, never faces repercussions for what she did. She does charity work, and the more, clearly the more charity work she does, the more she realizes she did wrong or whatever they were going for. And like, it's clearly meant to redeem her, but she still never faces any consequences. Literally the most bizarre thing about that sequence, about that scene, is that she's finding the people she herself killed and buried. In her head, clearly this is supposed to represent her realizing what she did was wrong and she's helping these families now, but like, why did she face nothing for that? Was the punishment guilt she felt? I don't know, because there's never a scene where they discuss that possibility. There's never a scene where she's shown to feel guilty about this. And spoiler alert, she has a demise at the end of the movie, but the demise at the end doesn't have anything to do with the fact she was a cartel leader. Her demise is caused by fucking relationship issues. In the very last scene in the movie, she's essentially represented as a saint, which felt so gross to me because she never faced the consequences. She killed people, and her girlfriend didn't know that, which is, I guess, why this happened. But like, as a movie, like as a narrative, why are we celebrating this character who never faced repercussions for this? And even as someone who's not Mexican and doesn't know much about Mexican culture, like even to me, that just felt, what's the word I'm looking for? That felt disrespectful to the people who actually had to go through this. Again, I don't know much about the cartel and how it does affect Mexicans in Mexico in real life, but one thing I found very odd about this movie is that at one point, Amelia tells Zoe's character, the lawyer, I forgot what her fucking name was in the movie, but she tells her to get the cartel members to reveal where the bodies are. And Zoe's like, how am I gonna do that? And Amelia's like, they'll tell you, you're a lawyer. And I'm like, that's fucking weird. Like, and like the cartel life, the mafia life, the gang life, you don't rat out your brothers. And yet in this movie they do, simply because she's a lawyer. And I'm like, ain't no fucking way that would ever happen in real life. And I did notice something that the trans community has been pointing out, which is the deeper voice scene. There is a scene in the movie where Amelia gets mad at Selena Gomez's character. And as she's getting mad, she gets violent. And her voice gets deeper again. It goes back to the voice she had when she was Manitas. And you know, there's this stereotype, there's this belief that people transition into women to be violent, to hide the fact they're men and they want to be violent towards women. I do understand why trans women are very angry with this scene, because I feel like it feeds into that stereotype. And also, you're gonna have a lot of suspension of disbelief for this movie, because Selena Gomez plays Amelia's ex-wife. So part of the story is that when Amelia was transitioning, she had this whole cover story that Manitas died, so Selena Gomez and their 2 kids had to run away to Switzerland. So at this point in the movie, Selena thinks Manitas is dead. She thinks Amelia is like a cousin or aunt or something that Manitas had. But it was just bizarre to me, because I think the time skip was like 4 years. The lawyer could recognize Amelia, but not the wife or ex-wife, whatever she technically is at this point. And it's like, you knew her longer than the lawyer did, but the lawyer was the one that recognized her. And there's no, and on that note, there's no communication between Amelia and Selena Gomez's character, like true communication. So that's why the end happens the way it did. And like, it could have been avoided if they would just fucking talk to each other. I only really have like 2 compliments for this movie. One is a real compliment. I do have to give them the makeup department props on the Manitas look, because I actually thought that was a totally different actor, but it turns out that is Carla in makeup, so wow. But then my second compliment isn't really a compliment, it is me. Despite the fact I just insulted Selena Gomez's singing, I do have to kind of come to her defense when it comes to acting, because I did always think she was a better actor than singer. But I think people are being a little too harsh on her acting in this movie. One of the biggest complaints about her acting in this movie is that her facial expressions don't match the words coming out of her mouth. There's also a huge discussion about her Spanish in this movie and how it's apparently terrible. Again, don't speak Spanish. I don't know how her sounds different than other Spanish. But personally, I did think her facial expressions matched the subtitles. But I'm saying that also acknowledging the fact there's probably a bunch of nuances I missed in because they were lost in translation. So that sums up my views on this movie. I wasn't expecting the rant on this movie to be as long as it was. But there's a lot going on with this movie. The behind the scenes of this movie also just feels really insensitive, and I did know that information going into the movie, so I'm sure that affected the bias I had, but even just removing that bias, I was like, this is just not good. Even as a musical, even as a story, I don't understand. This was the movie with 13 fucking nominations, the most nominations in 2025 compared to all the other movies. Are you fucking kidding me? We need to up our standards. But I'm glad, I guess the voters had some sense, because this did only win 2 awards. One of them was Best Supporting Actress for Zoe. Personally, I don't think she should have won, but whatever. And then the other one being Best Song, definitely don't think it should have won. And again, that award, that speech was weird, because the woman was clearly off her fucking rocker on either drugs or alcohol. But now that has nothing to do with the movie. So, how do I end this? Don't recommend this. This should have never been on the Oscar radar. I gave this, to no one's surprise if you've made it this far, this was given 1 out of 5 stars. So the next movie I watched was not a Best Picture nominee this year, but its sequel was, so I did want to see the sequel, so I have to watch the first movie, and that is Dune. Dune Part 1. This is a sci-fi story about a man named Paul who needs to run away to a dangerous planet in order to protect his family. I will say off the bat, I did not give this a particularly high rating. Like, this is not 5 out of 5 for me. But that's because this type of movie, story, what have you, is not really typically my thing. But the FOMO was real, and like I saw some of those shots on Twitter and I'm like, oh my god, I have to watch it because like it's aesthetically pleasing. And I will say, set designs in this movie go hard. They're insane, they're beautiful. I really love the wide shots in this film. And the special effects, there's no denying that they were incredible. And Dune Part 2 special effects won this year. No, like the worm actually looked real, which I don't know why I'm so shocked with. It's just I'm so used to creatures having this like uncanny valley CGI look to them. But the worm looked real. I really liked the music. I thought the music was really cool. And I love the character designs. Like I liked the Freeman, and I really liked the group that the mom was a part of, like the Reverend Mother in those black robes. And because of all like the lore involved and the very obvious Catholic and Middle Eastern influences, all of those things combined with the wide shots and the music, it just made me feel like I was watching a religious epic. I will say, from a sound design perspective, I actually have very mixed feelings about this. I actually liked how loud the music was, especially that one specific motif. It's just everything else in this movie was so quiet. Like the constant whispering from the actors, specifically Paul and his mom, drove me fucking nuts. Typically, I could still understand actors when they're whispering, but I don't know what it was about this movie where I could not understand Timothée Chalamet and whoever plays the mom. Like, they were just not enunciating, and all I could hear was like ASMR sounds, and I hate ASMR. So the movie in that regard really bothered me. I did have to put on subtitles. But then other than that, I don't really have much else to say about this as a story, and I do think it's because this movie was divided into 2 parts. I'm gonna say something that's maybe slightly controversial, but I remember the backlash Wicked got when it was announced it was gonna be 2 parts, when Mockingjay was announced, and when Spider-Verse was announced as 2 parts. But then this one got praised for it, and like I get it because this movie, not movie, but like the story has a huge fan base. The book is like this fucking big, and now that I've seen part 2, I understand why this story needs to be 5 hours long on film. But it's just crazy to me that those like 3 franchises, as an example, were criticized when this one was praised, because personally, I think Mockingjay Part 1, Wicked Part 1, and Across the Spider-Verse, they all feel like their own movie. Dune Part 1 specifically, like it just felt incomplete, if that makes sense. On that note though, because I did go into this knowing George Lucas was Star Wars was highly inspired by the book. And then disclaimer before I go into that, this is not a critique of this movie. This is just an observation I have. But I see where George Lucas got a lot of his inspiration from, because as much as I love Star Wars, there were certain things of this movie, and I'm thinking of that like weird voice thing specifically, and you know, the sandy dunes, where George Lucas, he crossed a fine line between inspiration and plagiarism. Maybe back in the day he was accused of plagiarizing, but like the moment I heard that voice thing and what they use it for, I was like, this is the Force. Again, that's not a critique on Dune, because Dune came out first, but knowing like the lore of Star Wars and like what George Lucas read and was inspired by, I was like, huh. I did not give this a low rating despite my feelings. I did give this a middle of the road rating. So for me, Dune Part 1 is a 3.5 out of 5-star movie. So next I watched one of the nominated short documentaries, and that is Instruments of a Beating Heart. And this is about a current first grader in Japan who auditions for a concert that will be performed for the future first graders. And this was very cute, like watching all these young children learn these instruments. I think they were playing Ode to Joy, cheering for each other. There was one scene where a little boy was crying because the friend he wanted to win didn't win, and I thought that was precious. There was one point, because like I thought the teacher was a little too harsh on the main girl they were focusing on, so there was one point where I started tearing up, and it kind of just like never stopped. And I don't, considering the rest of this documentary, I don't know why I felt like that. Like, did I have a mean teacher I forgot about until now, or what? But despite my tears, in the end I just thought it was cute, but just okay overall. So I gave this 3 out of 5 stars. So next, there was a week where I was so sick because I went to the Eagles Super Bowl parade, and let me tell you, maybe we should not stand in 25-degree weather for 3 hours because I was knocked off my feet with a fever. So when I finally got better, I decided to celebrate by watching 3 movies in a day. If you know me, I could only typically do the one. But the first movie I watched that day was Dune Part 2. So in this movie, Paul is now with the Freemen and he is seeking revenge on those who went against his family. So when it comes to the technical aspects of this film, whether that's set designs, the music, my opinions match Part 1's. I didn't think they were like that different from each other. I didn't think one was better than the other. An extra comment I have is that I did really like what Jessica looks like in this, like with all the tattoos on her face. I thought she looked pretty cool. My favorite character in this one was actually Austin Butler's character. First off, I've never seen someone so fucking bald, holy shit. But I really liked his character. I thought he was a fascinating villain because he was nuts. He was a psychopath and he would just kill just to kill. He would kill for the glory of it, but at the same time, he respected those he fought. And I've always loved a villain who appreciates their rivals. And I actually really like Jessica more in this movie than the first one. Like, yes, as a person, she is worse than this. She's very manipulative and trying to get her way. But for me personally, that made for a more interesting character. There are a few things about this movie, though, where I just cannot give it the praise I saw other people give. I know, I'm sorry. Like, part of it is because this is just not for me. And I watched it just so I could say I'm watching all the Oscar Best Picture nominees. I am unfortunately of the very unpopular opinion. The first hour of this movie was incredibly boring. Having that gap between the movies, it took me a long time to get back in the story. And I don't know why, but I really just could not get with it in that first hour. The rest of the movie was great, and it was like the exact pace I needed, the exact excitement I needed, but that first hour really killed it for me. That is really all I have to say about this movie. I don't have much to say just because everything I loved about the movie is the technical aspects that I've already spoken about for the first one. So, but because of that like long stretch of a boring hour, I did give this only 3 out of 5 stars. The second movie I watched on this day is another Best Picture nominee, and that is The Substance. This is about a celebrity who's been forced out of the job due to her age. She has been deemed too old, and she starts taking a drug called The Substance, and it causes her to turn into a younger, better version of herself. First of all, I want to say great performances by both Demi Moore and Margaret Qualley. Again, I wanted Demi Moore to win for Best Actress. She was my first pick, but I think Margaret Qualley should have gotten some type of acting recognition in this because she did a great job too. The special effects and the makeup of this movie went crazy, and so did the cinematography. And all in all, like in general, this is a movie that knows how to make you uncomfortable. And boy was I uncomfortable, because I am not a body horror fan when it comes to live action. If it's animated, I'm fine, but something about live action gets me extremely squeamish, like vomiting, blood, wounds opening up. I have to cover my eyes. I just cannot take it, and there's a lot of that in this movie. There's close-ups in this movie of things I don't want close-ups of, and that's, you know, the wounds and stuff, but the scene I'm thinking of specifically is the one where Dennis Quaid, I talked about his son earlier in this movie, now that I'm thinking about it, but anyway, it's the scene where Dennis Quaid is eating the shrimp, and it's like literally only his mouth is in the frame, and I wanted to throw up watching it. Thank God I wasn't eating anything while watching this movie. And the sounds in this movie. This is another like sound design praise I'm giving. There are so many visceral sounds. I'm like gagging thinking about this movie because that's scenes in my head. But there's so many visceral sounds in this movie that we're subjected to as audience members. And the director, what is her name? Coralie something. When I catch you, because girl, you did your job. And I really like the callbacks to other films in this movie. There's 3 I'm thinking of, and maybe there's more inspiration, but the first one I'm thinking of is The Shining, just because the way the hallway was framed and then the bathroom. It reminds me of the hallway scenes in The Shining where the little boy's riding the tricycle, and the bathroom scene with Jack Nicholson. All that blood in the end just flying everywhere reminds me of Carrie. The body's relation to Sue as she gets worse as a person reminds me of The Picture of Dorian Gray. And the message of this movie, it's a very unsettling message that makes, you know, me as a woman feel sad. Society really hates that we get older. We see it online. We see the way like men specifically talk about us, about how we let ourselves go and all that crap. They hate that we get older, society in general, and a lot of us, and I'm going to include me in this too because I have moments, a lot of us agree with that just because of all the negative things we tell ourselves. Maybe we don't agree with it right away, but we learn to. We learn to subconsciously agree with it.
So come on folks, let's join the band as we all head for the refreshment stand.
to the point I talked about in the last clip, what have you. I remember in the very beginning of the movie, I should say very beginning, but the scene of the movie where she officially has the drug, Demi Moore is completely naked, she is looking in the mirror, and I just remember thinking like, girl, you look gorgeous. You shouldn't need that drug. But like, I feel like we could tell this to so many, I'm gonna keep the topic on women just because that's what the movie was about. We could tell so many women this and they won't believe it. Like, we are our own worst enemy. I've seen so many women that I thought were beautiful, but when you hear them talk about themselves, they don't think so. And I do want to compare the fate of the woman to the fate of the man, because now we have Sue. Sue crawled out of her back. She is a young woman. Margaret Qualley is, I think, in her 30s, so we can assume Sue is between the ages of 25 to 30, so half of Elizabeth's age. And this young woman, Sue, replaced Elizabeth because Elizabeth was too old. Meanwhile, you have Dennis Quaid's character, who's obviously old. He's still in the business and calling the shots, and nobody's questioning his age, but the woman's age got questioned. And another thing about this movie that really just drives home this point about how women aging in general, not just in the industry, are treated, is how Sue and Elizabeth play off each other. You have Elizabeth, who is jealous of Sue, so that is the trope of an older woman who's jealous of a much prettier younger woman. She's jealous of her youth. And then you have Sue, who constantly gets angry with Elizabeth, which follows the trope or like the real life trend of, you know, young people like criticizing their elders and making fun of them for being elders, not realizing one day we are going to be in their shoes. And then you have the scenes where Sue, she's treating Elizabeth's body like garbage, like no care for her. She just plops her on the ground. Then she hates herself in that form, and that represents women getting mad about getting older. And then there's the fight scene. This is kind of a spoiler, but the two of them do split at one point and they're fighting each other. And that seemed to me like a physical representation of a woman mentally fighting with herself, because Sue and Elizabeth technically are the same person. They're just like split personalities in a sense. So when they're fighting, it reminds me of like when I look in the mirror and then there's the part of me that thinks I look fine and I'm living my best life, and then there's the other part of me that has self-doubt, and then I put myself down. And again, to me, it represented a woman talking down to herself and fighting with herself. And honestly, given the message of this movie, I think Demi Moore was a great casting choice for Elizabeth, and not just because she put on a great performance, but Elizabeth's trajectory reminds me of Demi Moore. Demi Moore was very popular in the 80s, but now that she's older, I don't really hear much of her anymore, and I was like, because I remember when the movie came out, I was actually shocked to see her name. And for this movie, I feel like not only is it commentary about women aging, whether that's in the industry or just in general in real life, I feel like it could be a commentary for other things. For example, drug use, which I think goes without saying. And I think it's also partially a commentary about how men view women. This goes back to how Dennis Quaid's character treated Elizabeth like shit when getting rid of her. Another way this goes back to how men viewing women is how the two characters are dressed in their shows and what their shows are actually like. They're both exercising shows. Elizabeth was dressed more conservatively, much less risque than Sue's character. Sue was like just practically half naked. Elizabeth's dances were just regular exercise dances that you would see in old 80s tapes, while Sue's were risque dances, like she was twerking, she was just doing things I would do at the club, and it was just also how these two characters were filmed. During Elizabeth's show, it was like a widescreen. You could see her entire body. The camera angle never changed, whereas Sue's show, there were so many close-ups of her private parts. There's literally one scene where a bunch of men crowd around a camera that was zoomed in on her butt. As for the ending of this movie, I'm almost done with this review, I swear, but as for the ending of this movie, I loved how chaotic it was. It was crazy. Even though one part made me gag, and that's with the boob coming out. I literally gagged watching that. And I will admit, this was at first a 3 out of 5 star movie for me, just because again it reminded me of how much I don't like live action body horror, but then at the same time I didn't want to criticize, like, because it made me uncomfortable, and I didn't want to criticize a movie for doing what it was supposed to do. Plus, the more I thought about this, the more I really resonated with the message. So I ended up giving this 4.5 out of 5 stars. And then the last movie I watched that day in celebration of not being sick was Flow. This was nominated for Best Animated Feature and won, and it was also nominated for Best International Feature. And this is about a cat trying to survive a great flood and learning to live with other species. Not a single word in this movie was spoken, and I loved every second of it. And I just love it so much because as an animal lover, as a zoology major, as someone who's currently working with animals, something I liked about this is that the animals weren't really like Disney-fied. Like, this beat a Disney movie. It beat Inside Out too. All the animals acted in a way those species would actually act. None of these animals were anthropomorphized. And it captured the mannerisms of these species really well, which made for great humor. And this movie also stressed me out. Every time the cat fell off the boat, I got so stressed out even though I knew the outcome, but why? And the found family shot at the end of the movie made me cry. I gave this movie 4 out of 5 stars. And then a movie that really surprised me, and this was nominated for Best Supporting Actor, who ended up winning, and also Best Original Screenplay, that is A Real Pain. This is about 2 American cousins who visit their grandmother's hometown in Poland. I say this surprised me just because I've always kind of had issue with Jesse Eisenberg. I don't know what my issue with him specifically is. It's just usually I don't like his movies. But Kieran Culkin was getting a lot of Oscar buzz for this. I watched it more so for him than Jesse, and I was just impressed with everything involved in this, including Jesse. Kieran's nomination and win was definitely deserved. His character Benji and the way he acted out Benji, it has a very, very in-your-face style of acting, whether Benji's happy or upset. Like, he always has a presence on screen. And honestly, I think Jesse Eisenberg's acting deserves some praise in this too. It's not getting as much attention just because he's not as in your face as Kieran is, but his character has a very like subtle personality. He did a great job playing like the quiet, anxious, worried character. I also wasn't expecting the screenplay to take the turn it did. I don't know why, but I went into this thinking it was like a comedy. So I was expecting this to be a funny black humor movie for some reason. I don't know who advertised this to me, but that's what I went into this for, and I'm actually glad that's not what it was and we got what we got instead. But I just wasn't expecting the themes of grief and mental health to be explored in a very well done way. And it kind of goes back to the title. Maybe the title helped with that. I was expecting the title A Real Pain to be referring to something funny, but once the meaning of the title actually clicked, like my heart broke. Something else I wasn't expecting was just the contrast of the characters. I was expecting like the loud, funny one to have a great life and then the quiet, worried one to be struggling in life, but then it ended up being the opposite, and I like the exploration of that. One of the reasons I'm giving this movie a high rating is because I still find myself hoping like Benji is going to be okay, and then I have to remind myself that Benji's not real. He's a fictional character. But the reason I feel that way is because Kieran Culkin's facial expression at the end of the movie was just so heartbreaking. I ended up giving this movie 4.5 out of 5 stars. Alright, the penultimate movie I watched is the short documentary nominee, and that is Incident. This is actually the last Oscar nominee I saw. And this is a short documentary of a fatal murder of a black man by police in Chicago in 2018. And it's told only using security footage and body cam footage, police body cam footage. I grew up in Chicago. I lived there until just a couple years ago. So I actually vaguely remember this happening. Just for extra context for you guys, I remember tensions were really high when this happened because if I remember correctly, this was around the time of the hearing of Laquan McDonald. The Laquan McDonald case was another case of police shooting a black boy because he was only 17, so he wasn't like a man like this guy was. And let me tell you, this is only 30 minutes long, but it made me so fucking angry. I watched this at work during my lunch break, and I cannot believe I did that. I was so fucking angry. I had to get up and pace my office for like a solid 20 minutes just to calm my heart down. Using only security footage and police cam footage was so smart of this documentarist just to force us to make our own opinion, because what I was hearing was not matching what I was seeing. I think it was very smart for the guy who put this together to not put like a narrator or anything, because the clips really did speak for themselves and you were able to form your own opinion. You were able to see for yourself what actually happened versus what the police were saying into their walkie-talkies and into their body cam footage. I ended up giving this 4 out of 5 stars. Then the last movie I watched in February, I went to the theater for, and that is The Monkey. This is about a wind-up toy monkey causing deaths in a family. I saw about this because I read the short story in October of last year, the short story by Stephen King. Do not go into this expecting it to be an adaptation. It's more so an inspiration. And it's fascinating because it's a horror. Some of the stuff that happens in this movie is so stupid. So I appreciated that the movie didn't seem to take itself too seriously. You could really feel it in the editing style. And there were a few cutaway scenes that like actually got a decent chuckle out of me. And I like the idea of the twin brothers, both the younger and older versions, being played by the same person. Especially for the younger version. I didn't realize they were played by the same person until the end credits, because I remember sitting there like, wow, the nerdy one can act well, but the bad boy cannot act to save his life. So maybe just that actor can't act that specific personality. It's just, I don't know. I definitely wished there was more done about the father-son plot line. It was set up to be really important, but then we never get a proper resolution in the end. At least it feels that way to me. And just because of other factors in this movie, especially at the end, I feel like we didn't get a proper conclusion. I left the theater pretty unsatisfied. So luckily it was like, if we're using girl math, it was, you know, free because I got to see 2 movies for the price of 1 thanks to the Stubbs account. Definitely won't be revisiting this. I gave this 2 out of 5 stars. Now, the one TV show I watched in February is an anime I started in January but finished in February. And the anime is Elfen Lied. This is about a woman named Lucy who is part of a species that has horns and telekinetic arms. She escapes from a lab and is found by 2 humans, and now people from the lab are pursuing her. And I, despite all the hype, did not like this. Specific people recommended this to me because they're like, yeah, it's a dark and twisted anime, like everyone's seen it, you have to catch up on it. I just want those of you who recommended this to me to know that excessive gore and tits is not a good story make. And I want to expand on that. Like, the people who recommended this to me, they're not the only ones to talk about it this way. I've seen a lot of people online talk about Elfen Lied as in this, like, this mature story. It could be gory, it could be graphic, but it has dark and twisted themes. It's a dark and twisted story, which I'm all about. I love gore, but I love dark and twisted, so that's what I wanted from this. But I didn't get dark and twisted. Interesting ideas, but I definitely didn't, the execution definitely didn't work for me. And graphic, yeah, it was graphic, but I felt like it got to the point where it was corny and just unneeded, and the blood didn't look like blood, so it looked really fucking stupid. And the nudity in this I felt oftentimes was very much not needed and felt fan servicey. The pacing of the show seemed all over the place. I think only being 13 episodes was detrimental to it. But then also, when it comes to characters, I didn't like any of them, and I really hated the relationship and the dynamic between Kota and Yuka, and that takes up like a good chunk of the show. And it had a lackluster ending that made me feel nothing other than I wasted time on this. I will say though, like, voice acting really makes or break a show. I had to watch this in the English dub because I watched this on Prime, and the Japanese version wasn't available. But the English dub is horrendous. All the girls in the show speak in like this nauseating high-pitched tone, and the 2 young girls, the 2 that are about 12, like, you can clearly hear that they're played by grown adults faking a little kid voice. Is that you now? Like, for 13 episodes, I had to listen to that. And someone I really couldn't stand just because of the way they talked was Yuka. Nearly everything she said was said like a question, even when she wasn't asking a question. The high pitch in her voice just got even higher for no reason. And anytime a character was angry, especially Lucy, the voice actor would speak in like this weird whispery hoarse voice. It's like a deep voice whisper with a hoarse strain that you could tell probably hurts their throat, and it's to sound like cool, deep, and threatening, but to me it was just grating on the ears. By the end of the show, this to me, it just feels like it's written for 12-year-olds who think gore and nudity make for depth and something mature. It could be a gateway for gory media and more mature media, definitely. I was told I would probably like it since I'm older, but it very much feels like something 12-year-olds think adults like. And as an adult who's seen other media with these themes, with gore and nudity, this just felt too immaturely angsty for me. The only thing I liked about the show was the music. The opening theme and like the Gregorian chant style music. That's it. That's my only compliment. I in no way recommend this to anyone. I did see a musical in February. I feel like it's been so long since I've seen one, and that has Come From Away. This is a true story of multiple planes landing in a town in Newfoundland after the 9/11 attacks. I will say this is a really beautiful story and one of the very few to make me cry. I cry like a baby when it comes to movies and TV shows, and I tear up reading books, but for some reason musicals rarely ever make me do that. Les Mis and this one, the only two that happened for. The most impressive part of this musical was the number of cast members. Every time I'm interested in a musical, I listen to a cast album first, because the way these prices are going, I'll be damned if I paid that much money to see a musical just for the music to be hot garbage. So I have to make sure I like the music at the very least, you know, that could make or break a musical. And I ended up loving the music for this. But when I was listening to the cast album and, you know, I didn't have any visuals, I was thinking the show was gonna have like 40 people involved, but it's actually only like a small group of people. It was like 15 maybe, and each person played 3 different characters, and they played them well. When I noticed that's what was happening, I was scared I wasn't gonna be able to differentiate them. But I was, and I had no problem. Not just because of like visual cues, like they would put on a hat or a coat, but just because of the personality, the song, the music motifs, and then like the accents. They all nailed the accents they had to use. Given the length of the show, this is actually longer than I thought, because there's no intermission, so I was expecting this to be like Six the Musical, where it's like an hour and a half long, but it is the typical length of a musical, so I'm shocked there's no intermission. But like in retrospect, I'm actually glad there's not, because I think it would have ruined the fast pace that they were going for. Because part of the story is that they were on the ground for like 3 days, and a lot happened in those 3 days, so you do need that fast pace. I love the Irish inspired music. We love Irish music in this house, and I really like the orchestra. The orchestra is on stage, and sometimes they are part of the show. Like there's a scene where they're dancing at a bar, and everyone that, minus the drummer, everyone that can carry their instruments comes out and starts dancing with them, so they're one of the customers. And what's actually funny about my journey with the show, I remember, I think the last time I watched the Tonys is when they performed this. They performed the opening song, and I remember not being too impressed. I couldn't grasp what the musical was about from the opening song alone. I also just wasn't paying attention to the lyrics, and I was like, oh, I'll never see it. But you know, FOMO, the musical theater community, loves this musical. I saw it was coming to Philly, and I saw that the tickets were actually pretty affordable, and I was like, I should consider it. Let's listen to the cast album. And I'm really glad I saw this, because this was great. It's just impressive to me. They took such a sensitive topic, turned it into a musical, and it was well done. It was not insensitive. I had a really great time with this. I do highly recommend seeing this if you ever get the chance. And that is it for this long-winded video. Let me tell you, I am not excited to edit this. I had a burst of energy during that first hour of filming. This probably took me 2.5 hours, but it is 11:58 p.m. It is time for me to go to bed because I have work tomorrow. So, as always, let me know your thoughts down below if you've seen any of these things or just want to discuss stuff like how are the Oscars for you? Did the people you pick win? Are you disappointed in any of the wins? If you like this video, give it a big thumbs up, comment, subscribe. Y'all know the drill. Without further ado, I'm gonna peace out and I'll see you guys later. Ciao, tutti.